The Pacific Crest Trail is more expensive than you probably think. It's all the decisions you make before and during the trail that will cost you thousands, and I learned that the hard way. In this video, I'll talk a little bit about logistics and a lot about budgeting and what the PCT actually costs. One topic I haven't touched on yet is boxes and postage. So I'm talking about resupply boxes, bounce boxes, receiving stuff while you're on trail, and sending stuff away while you're on trail. First of all, the way it works with these boxes is that you go to a post office, you pick up a box. They have a variety of shapes and sizes, so that's very convenient. You pack it up with whatever you need to send yourself, you tape it, you write your address on it and your name, and then you bring it to the post office and you send it away. You can send it to another post office for general delivery where they will hold your box for a short period of time, or you can send it to a store or a campground along the trail. That's especially helpful when there is no post office nearby or when you're sending it a couple weeks ahead. Typically, you can find out on Facebook groups or even in far out comments which businesses accept these boxes from you and what they want you to write on the box. And I would also just write or draw stuff on all sides of the boxes so it's easily found whenever you go pick up your box. The first one I want to talk about is resupply boxes. I personally don't think you should send yourself any before you start the trail unless you have specific dietary requirements. I sent myself 6 boxes in the desert and I should not have done that. That was a mistake. The reasons I chose to do it is, one, I thought that the food that I would be able to get on trail would be way too limited and not nutritious enough. And 2, I thought that it would be too expensive to buy it on the trail. The reasons I would not do this again is, 1, I basically got sick of the food that I had packed in these boxes in week 1. 2, I got pretty jealous of my friends buying all the stuff that I was craving in these little convenience stores. 3, it was a lot of hassle to prepare these boxes when I got to San Diego, and I should have just spent that time connecting with other hikers and getting excited and kind of more mentally preparing. And finally, 4, I thought that this would save me money, but it was actually quite expensive. I paid $92 to post 6 boxes. For at least 3 of those, I had to pay a $10 handling fee just to pick it up. It doesn't apply to post offices, but when you send your box to a business, you may have to pay a fee for them holding on to your box. Next is a bounce box. This is simply you sending a box from one point on the trail to another point further along the trail. This is specifically handy for internationals who don't have anyone who can support them locally. I, for example, shipped my ice axe to Kennedy Meadows South for the Sierras after I climbed San Jacinto. Then you can also mail stuff away that you no longer need. For Americans, this is quite straightforward. You just send it home. For internationals, I would try and make an American friend who can hold on to some of your stuff. That is what I did. Alternatively, you can check the Facebook groups if there's any trail angels who can help you out with this. If that doesn't work, then I would resort to a bounce box. The final thing about boxes is receiving things. You may have friends or family back home who want to send you things, or you may need to order some new gear or new shoes to the trail. The easiest way is to have it delivered at a post office. Keep in mind that you should use USPS in that case, because the post office typically won't accept DHL, UPS, or FedEx. If that is not an option, then again, check if there are any businesses along the trail where you can mail stuff to. Okay, that's it for the logistics part. Now, before I jump into budget, I am curious to hear from you what you think a PCT through hike actually costs. And if you have hiked the PCT before, I would love to hear what this whole thing costs you. Personally, I didn't really hold back at all on this trail. I wanted the full experience, and for me that included good food on the trail, plenty of town stops, quite a few comfy beds, drinks with friends, and more bacon cheeseburgers than I can count. But before all that, it started with the pre-trail expenses. As a complete beginner, I had to buy all my gear from scratch. I had literally nothing. Now with this, keep in mind that I'm the kind of person who would rather spend a little bit more money upfront on the right gear because I know that I will never throw anything away and I'll be using it forever. So I'd rather spend a little bit more to buy stuff that is good quality, that lasts a long time, and that doesn't annoy me after 1 week. So a few things before I get into this breakdown. This does not even include all the stuff I bought that I didn't end up taking in the end or that I sent away really early on. So stuff like my extra socks, I had compression socks and sleep socks, everything GoPro related, which I didn't end up using. All that stuff is not included in this breakdown. There's also some stuff in the electronics category that I didn't include in this breakdown. For example, my Garmin watch, I also upgraded my phone, and for example, the AirTags, I don't think these are a necessity, but it is a nice to have, and that's why I didn't include it. And finally, I didn't include a bunch of small things that really add up. Things like Leukotape, K-tape, a small toothbrush and toothpaste, medicine, some first aid stuff, chapstick, sunscreen, tenacious tape for repairs, all that stuff. It really adds up, but I haven't included this in this gear breakdown. So the first one is big items. That includes my backpack, my tent, sleeping bag, and sleeping pad. This is obviously the biggest cost item. And after I bought all this stuff, I felt very committed to hike the PCT. The second category is clothes. Again, I had to buy everything from my sun hoodie to my underwear, but the most expensive things were definitely my puffy and my rain jacket, and that is specifically because I just wanted something a little higher quality, and I'm really happy that I went with those items. The third category is electronics. As I mentioned before, I actually spent way more on this, but for the sake of this breakdown, it was $590, and the biggest one in that category is the Garmin InReach Mini 2, which is an absolute necessity. Other than that, it is power banks and my headlamp and a wall charger, which actually took me quite a bit of time to figure out which wall charger I would want to bring. And then the smallest category is kitchen and water, so that includes my stove, my pot, my spork, a knife, and of course the Sawyer squeeze and a Sea-Nog bag. And the last category is miscellaneous, which includes a bunch of stuff like a head net, a trowel, cooler cloth, and I also had one of those sleeves to put my water bottle in and just a bunch of that small stuff. So in total, I spent $3,772 on gear up front. As I mentioned, that number in reality was a lot higher, but this is kind of like the necessities. So that kind of takes me to this breakdown of pre-trail expenses. So first of all is that gear category, which is definitely the biggest. And then the next category in pre-trail expenses is the visa. As I mentioned in my previous video, for me, this was $185, but I have written down $435 in this case, because since last year, you have to pay an additional $250 fee. So just to make these costs a little bit more realistic, if you're looking into hiking the PCT in the future, then that's what you'd be looking at. The third category is insurance. I paid $520 for the entire period, and I was very well insured. I actually had to use my insurance as well, so I was glad that I had it. And the final category is flights. Now, I had to book 2 separate flights, so that's $1,050 in total. This does not include the transport from the airport to the actual trail, and you also need to keep in mind that you may want to spend a couple more days before you start the trail. That is pretty expensive as well. You have to find a hotel or a hostel, which is pretty expensive. You have to eat out, and yeah, that adds up really quick. So keep that in mind as well. So in total, I would say pre-trail cost is $5,777, but in reality, expect that to be even higher, especially if you're not really watching your budget like I was. So for the on-trail category, keep in mind that I did not hike every single mile on the PCT. I actually had to skip quite a bit because of injury. So for a lot of these categories, I'm kind of making assumptions, looking at how much I spend typically on a day or a certain stretch, and then extrapolating that and seeing how much I would have spent if I had hiked every mile of the trail. So it's kind of an estimation, but I think it comes really close to how much I would have spent. So the first category is subscriptions, and that includes my Garmin InReach Mini and my Verizon phone plan. Then the second category is the gear that I bought on trail. I had to buy all my snow gear on the trail, so that includes my Bear canister, ice axe, micro spikes. I actually lost my micro spikes, so I had to buy a second pair. And you need to keep that in mind, that you might also lose a bunch of stuff. A lot of that you could find again in a hiker box. For example, I lost my trowel and I found one in a hiker box, so I didn't have to buy a new one. But with some of these things, like, you won't be as lucky to find a pair of micro spikes in a hiker box just before the Sierras. I also got convinced to buy crampons in Kennedy Meadows South, which I regretted, and later I bought micro spikes in Bishop. So this category can get quite expensive. It also includes things like new pairs of socks, new pairs of shoes. It's very common to have to buy 3 or 4 new pairs on trail. Talking about shoes, I would not order all of the shoes before you get on trail, especially if you're a beginner, because your feet might change. They might get a size bigger, or you might just figure out that the shoe doesn't really work for you. So I would just buy this when you're on the trail and have it shipped to you. The third category is resupply. And this is exactly what I was talking about before, that I made some assumptions and I extrapolated. So 4,200 is a very big number. And I think you can definitely do this a lot cheaper, especially if you eat ramen and nor rice ice most of the time. But my strategy was to have a little bit of a mix. So I did quite a lot of dehydrated meals, which are really expensive. They can be like $13, $14, $15. And then I had other days where I did eat ramen and all the basic stuff. But I basically bought whatever I felt like. So my resupply got really expensive. Then town food and drinks is really the category where your money just disappears and you don't know what's happening. Also, when you get hiker hunger and you are on trail thinking about bacon cheeseburgers, then it's really hard to stop yourself. Then another big one that you can definitely do a lot cheaper is lodging. I stayed in town quite a bit, so this really added up. And I tried to keep this as low as possible by sharing hotel rooms with other people and staying with Trail Angels as much as possible. Of course, I would always make a donation with Trail Angels, but generally it's quite a bit cheaper than hotel rooms, and it has things like laundry included sometimes, maybe even a meal. So I think you can make this a lot cheaper or more expensive if you want. Then finally, miscellaneous. This includes things like postage, which I talked about before. I think for me that ended up being more than $200 because I had to send stuff ahead, and I obviously had those boxes in the desert, which I would definitely not do. But yeah, you should definitely budget a little bit for that. Also, some medical expenses. I really suffered from altitude sickness, so I decided to get some medicine before heading into the Sierras, and I had to pay for that consultation. Keep in mind with medical as well that you may have other medical stuff come up. I actually spent more than $2,000 on medical bills for physio, and I had to get an MRI because of my injury, and eventually the insurance paid that back, but that took quite a while. Like, that took a couple months. So it's good to have that money saved up front, because you may have to pay for it up front. And then the final thing that I included in this is transportation. So I hitched a lot, and that is quite cheap. I always offered to pay some gas money. Very often that's not necessary, but if you arrange a pickup with a Trail Angel, they will typically ask you for a contribution. So that's included in this as well. So that takes my total spent on trail to almost $10,800. I think you can definitely hike this trail with a much smaller budget, and you can also spend a lot more money. I definitely think that I spent a little bit more money than the average hiker, but I just wanted to give you my perspective. Okay, I want to close this off with my worst financial decision on trail, and I am sure this will be entertaining for you. It will be a little painful for me, but it's also a warning about getting vortexed into a town. This basically means that you get so tempted by all the comforts in town and you stay much longer than anticipated, and that's when your money just disappears. So I'm gonna share with you my receipt from spending 2.5 days at VVR, which is somewhere in the Sierras. I had just done an 8-day stretch, which took me way longer than I anticipated because I got quite sick. So me and my friend, we stayed at VVR. These are the cost for 2 people. This is so embarrassing. It's really bad. I just want to cry when I look at these costs. So at VVR, we just had to recover, and that got out of hand a little bit. So I'll walk you through what this cost for 2 people. So we had breakfast twice. We spent 1 night in a room. We had laundry. We had Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi was $20 for 24 hours. I had some issues back home that I really had to take care of, and that was really urgent, so I had to take the Wi-Fi. We had drinks because at that point I was just, I guess I had just given up. I don't know. Hardware, no clue what that is. Steak, this was the best meal on trail. I want to say it's worth it. At the time, it was really worth it, but oh my goodness. Pie for dessert. We took the ferry back, so we walked in and then we took the ferry back to the trail. Again, breakfast. I had to get Wi-Fi again to sort out this issue. A burger, because I love bacon cheeseburgers. A milkshake, some more beer, another dinner. And yeah, we had to do some resupply, fuel, another breakfast, and French toast. So the total of this whole thing was $761.34 for 2 people in one town. This is so embarrassing. Like literally, I want to cry when I look at this. At VVR, it's such a trap. Like you pay everything at the end. So they just put everything on a tab and you don't look at it the entire time. Obviously, you see the prices, but in my head, I wasn't adding everything up. And really at that point, I had given up. I was so sick of everything and I just didn't care anymore. Like I remember feeling that so strongly. But then when I had to pay this bill, I was in shock. And after that, I did change a little bit. I became more conscious of my money and how much I was spending in towns. But I'm sad that it had to come this far for me to realize that. So I'm sharing this. It's really embarrassing, but I hope that I will help someone out and you don't fall into this trap when you're out on trail. I honestly hope that I've learned from my own mistakes, because this summer I'll be back in the US to hike one of the most beautiful trails in the country, and this time I really have to do it on a budget. Really. Okay, that wraps up my little PCT planning series. The PCT is an awesome, life-changing experience, and if you're thinking about doing it, just do it. Make sure you're well prepared and you won't regret it. If you're new here and you want to learn more, make sure to check out those other videos. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll be sharing more lessons from the trail. And I also have some big hikes and road trips coming up that I'll be sharing with you. So I'd love it if you stick around, and I'll see you in the next one.